Somewhere along the path, maybe after a deep meditation, a major heartbreak, or a sudden breakdown that cracked your old identity in half, something shifted. You felt it. That flicker of something real underneath all the chaos. You saw through the noise, the endless chasing, the roles you were playing, and for a moment, it was powerful, grounding, like something ancient and honest, finally spoke up inside you and said, This is the truth. It felt like a relief. No more pretending, no more needing to impress, to push, to win at a game that never felt like yours to begin with. But then, something strange happened. After that insight, after that so-called awakening, instead of feeling alive, you started to feel empty. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way people would notice, but in a quiet, lingering kind of way, like your soul exhaled and then never quite inhaled again. You weren't depressed, at least not in the traditional sense. You could still laugh, still function, still show up, but something was missing. You stopped wanting things, stopped chasing goals, stopped dreaming like you used to. Not because you were lazy, but because the things you once wanted just didn't make sense anymore. The job, the status, the lifestyle, even relationships started to feel like distant echoes of a past self you no longer recognized. It's like you'd woken up from a dream, but didn't quite know what to do with the real world now that you were seeing it clearly. And the strangest part? You didn't feel free. You felt numb. We're told that spiritual awakening is supposed to feel like enlightenment, and that once you wake up, you'll be on fire with passion, purpose, and love for life. But for a lot of people, especially the thinkers, the feelers, the sensitive ones, the opposite happens. You don't wake up and feel full. You wake up and feel hollow. You look around and think, wait, this is it? This is what I was supposed to be excited about? You might even start to wonder if something's wrong with you. You ask yourself, why do I feel worse now that I finally see the truth? Why does everything feel meaningless? I remember talking to someone who had gone through something like this. She was smart, deep, the kind of person who read all the right books. Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, Krishnamurti. She meditated every morning, journaled every night. She got it, really got it. And then she had this huge breakthrough, a powerful awakening during a retreat. She came back glowing, peaceful, centered. But 2 months later, she told me she could barely get out of bed. She said, I used to be tortured by the thought that I wasn't doing enough. Now I honestly don't care if I do anything at all. I thought awakening would fill me with purpose, not leave me like this. She was staring at her ceiling every morning, wondering why she couldn't move, why everything felt like a chore, why nothing sparked her anymore. Not because she didn't want to live, but because she couldn't see the point. She had outgrown her old motivations, but hadn't found new ones to take their place. And that's the trap no one tells you about. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and one of the great minds of depth psychology, understood this long before it became trendy to talk about awakening. He wasn't interested in surface-level enlightenment or spiritual trends. He went deeper. He said, enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that sounds inspiring until you actually do it, because making the darkness conscious means seeing all the things you were trying not to feel, the fear, the emptiness, the loneliness, the anxiety that was quietly driving everything you did. You're not just waking up to beauty, you're waking up to pain, to the emptiness behind your ambition, to the fragility of identity, to the fact that most of what you were taught to care about was a distraction. This is where most people get stuck, because when we talk about spiritual awakening, we imagine it as an arrival, but it's not. It's a collapse. It's the beginning of a long, quiet unraveling of who you thought you were. The goals you used to chase, gone. The career ladder you were climbing, now it just looks like a meaningless game. The relationships you depended on to feel whole, suddenly they feel unstable or shallow or built on patterns you no longer want to play into. And time, even time feels strange. Days feel longer. Moments feel slower. It's like your whole sense of reality is dissolving and being rebuilt in real time. But you're not crazy, you're just in the space between what was And what's next? Here's something Jung would want you to understand. Your ego, your sense of self, doesn't just vanish after an awakening. It doesn't dissolve into cosmic oneness and leave you floating in bliss. No, it panics. It loses its reference points. It loses the script it's been reading from your whole life. Suddenly, the map it used to follow, the one that told it what success means, what love is, what happiness looks like, is useless. And without a new map, the ego doesn't know what to do, so it goes quiet. You don't lose motivation because you're lazy. You lose it because your inner compass is recalibrating. And until it finds new direction, nothing feels urgent anymore. And this space will be this in-between. It feels like limbo. You're not who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. You're just here. This is the part of the journey most people don't post about, the part after the light, the part when the fire goes out and the room goes quiet and you're just left with yourself, raw, unsure, and painfully aware. This is where the real inner work begins, not when you're glowing and inspired, but when you're empty, when everything that once moved you feels distant and lifeless. This isn't failure, this is the threshold. It's not depression, it's descent, the part of the hero's journey that happens in the cave, the one where you don't get answers, only silence, where you don't fight dragons. You just sit in the dark and wait for your eyes to adjust. And that's where we'll go next. So here you are. You've woken up from something, some illusion, some old version of reality, but you haven't yet woken up into something else. And this strange space you're in right now, this lack of drive, this numbness, it's not a breakdown, it's a pause. But not just any pause. This is something ancient, something almost sacred, and even if it doesn't feel like it right now. You see, most people don't make it this far because our modern world, the one built on speed, progress, performance, doesn't make space for this phase, teaches us to hustle through it, to medicate it, to fix it. But Carl Jung, he saw it differently. Jung believed this space, this sacred in-between, is not just necessary, it's essential. He called it part of the individuation process, the deep psychological transformation that allows a person to become who they truly are. Not just a role, not just a persona, but a whole, authentic self. And guess what? That can't happen if you skip the void. You can't go from illusion straight into clarity without passing through the fog. You can't just snap into alignment without first confronting what's been running your life from the shadows. And that's why you feel like this. Not because you're broken, but because you're becoming. And no one tells you about this part. They talk about awakening like it's a highlight reel. The moment you see through the lie and live your best life. But no one tells you that after the aha moment, there's often a long stretch of nothing. This loss of motivation, it's not a failure, it's not depression, at least not in the clinical sense. It's a recalibration, a deep reprogramming of your inner operating system. Let that sink in. You're not just changing your beliefs, you're changing your wiring. The fuel that used to move you, praise, performance, being seen, being approved of, it doesn't ignite you anymore. The goals that once fired you up, they feel distant now, hollow, even irrelevant. You used to push forward with endless to-do lists and 5-year plans. You had systems, metrics, motivation, playlists. Now you stare at your vision board and feel nothing. And it's terrifying. And until you realize it's not because you've failed, it's because the old structure has collapsed and you haven't built the new one yet. This is a spiritual upgrade. But it only works if you understand what's really happening. Carl Jung saw this before it ever became a trending hashtag or Instagram quote. He understood that our egos, the me we think we are, build a structure of motivation based on identity. We want to prove ourselves, we want to be respected, we want to feel valuable, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of human development. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to navigate society. But here's the twist. Awakening removes the mask. And when the mask goes, so does the ego's reward system. You're no longer trying to impress anyone. You're no longer interested in winning at a game you now realize doesn't matter. So all the goals that were attached to that identity, they stop making sense. And that's why you feel stuck. Not because you've lost your ambition, but because the fuel that powered it no longer applies. You're like an actor who stepped off stage mid-performance and now stands there, blinking in the silence, wondering, who was I performing for? And what happens if I stop performing? Most people panic here. They either try to slap the old mask back on, force themselves to care about the same things, push harder, try to make themselves productive again, or they spiral, thinking something's wrong with them, that they've lost themselves. But what if the truth is you're not losing yourself? You're finally shedding everything that isn't you. This isn't about becoming more efficient. It's about becoming more real. And the real you, the one underneath the persona, isn't motivated by fear or validation. It's not chasing a checklist. It's seeking something deeper. It's seeking alignment. And that takes time. It takes stillness. It takes sitting with the discomfort of not knowing who you are or what you want, without rushing to fill the silence. Because it's in that silence that something deeper starts to emerge. This is what Jung called individuation. Not just self-improvement, not just growth. Individuation is the process of bringing together all the fragmented parts of who you are, the shadow, the light, the mask, the core, and integrating them into something whole. Not a perfect self, not a successful self, but a true self, the part of you that isn't defined by what others think, the part of you that doesn't rise and fall with your achievements, the part that isn't afraid to be still, to be uncertain, to be in the void. That's what's waking up now, and that's why your old motivation doesn't work anymore, because that was the ego's language, but your soul, it speaks in symbols, in silence, in truth. So if you're floating in that post-awakening fog, wondering where your spark went, if you've stopped caring about the things that once drove you, if you feel like you're in limbo, stuck between the person you were and the person you're becoming, you're not crazy. You're in the middle of a transformation most people can't name, one that doesn't make sense on the outside, but is quietly reordering everything inside. And the fact that you're feeling this, that's not a sign of failure. That's the sign you're finally starting to wake up for real. In the next part, we'll go deeper into what happens after the mask falls. We'll explore how to navigate this psychological wilderness without forcing yourself back into old patterns, and how to begin building a new kind of motivation that actually aligns with your soul. Because awakening doesn't end at the insight. It begins when you choose to live from what you've seen. So here's where it starts to get real. Once you've seen through the illusion, once the ego falls away, something inside you begins rejecting anything that feels fake, forced, or ego-driven. Jobs that once made sense, suddenly unbearable. Relationships that once defined you, you can't find your reflection in them anymore. Even your carefully designed vision board from 2021 feels like a to-do list written by someone else. And this is the paradox. Awakening frees you and confuses you. It creates space. It strips away illusions. But it doesn't immediately fill the space with clarity. It leaves you open, exposed, waiting. Carl Jung warned about this. He said, if we stop here, we get stuck. Because right after awakening, there's a trap that many people, even smart, well-read, spiritually minded people, fall into. It's called spiritual bypassing. You see the illusion of the world and think, well, if it's all fake, then nothing matters. So you detach, you disengage, you float. And at first it feels like wisdom. You're above it all. You're zen. You're free. But underneath, you're disconnected, number, unrooted. You mistake detachment for transcendence, but there's a difference. The truth is, your soul doesn't want to escape the world. It doesn't want you to float away on a cloud of spiritual theory. It wants to live through you. It wants to bring something real and honest and eternal into this world through your body, your voice, your choices. The self, your deeper self, isn't here to reject life. It's here to redefine how you live it. But to step into that, you have to pass through a strange middle zone. Jung described this middle phase, and it's one of the most misunderstood stages of spiritual growth. It's not glamorous, it doesn't trend, and it doesn't look like enlightenment on Instagram. It looks like this, sitting in silence with no words to explain what's happening inside. watching the world rush past you while you feel like you're standing still, questioning everything, even the things you used to be sure about, feeling like you've disidentified from your past but haven't yet found your future. And it's easy to think you're lost, but Carl Jung would say you're not lost, you're in between. You're in that liminal space. You're no longer driven by ego-based ambition, but you haven't yet found your new way of being. And in our hyper-productive world, this kind of stillness is deeply misunderstood. People will say you're lazy, that you've lost your edge, that you're not manifesting hard enough. But stillness isn't laziness. It's not paralysis. It's a rite of passage. Your soul is calling energy back to itself. And here's the irony. When you start judging yourself for being still, for being in this quiet in-between, you actually block the very energy that's trying to return to you. Jung had a name for this psychological pause, enantiodromia. It's the moment when something swings so far in one direction, it flips into its opposite. So if your life was once defined by hustle, achievement, identity, awakening often triggers the opposite: stillness, silence, surrender. You go from "I must do everything" to "why do anything?" And that swing, it's not dysfunction, it's sacred. It's how the psyche restores balance, not by fixing, but by dissolving. Myth and ancient traditions speak of this phase too. They called it the hermit phase, the death before rebirth moment, the wandering in the wilderness, the cocoon phase. Here's the metaphor. A caterpillar doesn't just grow wings and become a butterfly, it turns into goo first. That's right, goo. A shapeless, structureless, completely broken down version of itself. Not a caterpillar anymore, not a butterfly yet, just soup. And while in that cocoon, it does nothing that looks productive. It doesn't hustle, it doesn't perform, it dissolves. And this is where the ego panics. It wants action, it wants definition, it wants a new identity now. But the self, your deeper self, is whispering something else. Let go, I'm building something deeper. And this is the part where modern spirituality often skips the hard stuff. It says, just follow your bliss, stay high vibe, manifest your dream life. But Jung would stop you right there, because if you skip the darkness, you skip the gold. Carl Jung believed in something far deeper than surface-level positivity. He believed in shadow integration, the process of facing, accepting, and healing the repressed and uncomfortable parts of yourself. Not as a bonus, not as an optional side quest, but as the core curriculum of becoming whole. And here's where it all comes together. This sacred nothingness you're feeling, this strange, quiet pause, that's where the unconscious finally has space to rise. That's where buried truths, long-forgotten wounds, and suppressed wisdom finally have a chance to surface. You're not failing, you're metabolizing. Your psyche is doing deep work, work so subtle, it looks like stillness. But it's not still, it's building. And here's the twist. During this time, your psyche will stall your motivation on purpose. It will block your usual drive. It will short-circuit your ability to chase clarity, not as punishment, but as protection, because it's trying to stop you from going back into old patterns too soon. It wants you to sit, to feel, to witness, because once you reclaim what's been hidden, your shame, your fear, your pain, your unlived truth, that's when something incredible starts to happen. Slowly, motivation returns, but it feels different. It's not anxious. It's not performative. It's not about hustle, status, or approval. It's older, more instinctual, more real. It doesn't feel like chasing. It feels like remembering, like something deep inside of you has always known what to do, but it needed you to stop pretending long enough to hear it. And now, for the first time, you're ready to listen. In the next and final part, we'll explore what it looks like to live after the void, how to build a life that isn't a performance, but a reflection of your truth, and how soul-led motivation changes everything from your goals to your relationships to how you move through the world. Because this journey isn't about waking up and checking out, it's about waking up and finally showing up. So here we are, you've passed through the void, you sat in the silence, you faced the stillness, you waited without answers, and now something new is stirring. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, It's not a flash of enlightenment or a lightning bolt of certainty. It's quieter than that, more subtle, but no less real. It feels like a gentle pull, not to return to your old life, but to build a new one. Carl Jung called this shift the emergence of the self, not the self as an idea or a new identity, but the self as a living, guiding inner compass. It's the part of you that was always there, but buried under layers of striving, performance, and fear. And when you live from this place, from the self, you're no longer chasing, you're responding. You stop trying to make things happen and start listening for what's already happening through you. You don't run toward clarity, you recognize it when it arrives. It's not about hustle, it's not about keeping up, it's not even about having a perfect plan. It's about resonance, alignment, the kind of truth that doesn't have to be explained, only followed. Jung had a name for this kind of living. He called it the symbolic life. It's when you start listening to the non-obvious. You notice synchronicities, you follow dreams, you trust inner nudges, gut feelings, the quiet yes that doesn't always make sense, but never feels wrong. You stop living just from your personality. You start living from your psyche, and that's when life stops being about survival and starts becoming about meaning. And here's something no one tells you. When the self starts guiding your life, it's not always fireworks. It's not always mystical downloads or blissful energy. Sometimes it's incredibly ordinary. It's a slow morning. It's a conversation that lights something up in you. It's a quiet no to something that once felt impossible to say no to. It's watching yourself begin to choose peace over performance, curiosity over control, honesty over approval. You're not driven by fear of missing out anymore. You're guided by something much quieter, what feels real. Living from the self doesn't mean giving up ambition, it means transforming it. Ambition becomes devotion. Devotion to growth, to integrity, to beauty, to something that matters. And here's the irony, this kind of motivation, it actually gets more done than ego ever could. Why? Because now it's not fueled by pressure, it's fueled by presence. And that's sustainable. That doesn't burn you out, that doesn't depend on results or applause. It just moves through you like breath. You'll notice your questions start to change too. You stop asking, what should I do? And you start asking, what's quietly calling me? You stop asking, what's the perfect plan? And you start wondering, where is life nudging me? You stop asking, how do I prove myself? And you start asking, what feels honest? This is how the self leads. Not with bullet points, but with pull. You stop trying to dominate life. You start participating with it. You begin to trust timing. You honor cycles. You listen before acting. It's not passive. It's not checked out. It's the deepest form of creative power, because now your energy is aligned. It's not scattered by doubt or driven by fear. It's focused, honest, rooted. This is what soul-led motivation feels like. It doesn't scream, it doesn't panic, it doesn't push, it invites. And when you say yes, not because you should, but because every part of you wants to, that's when life starts to feel different. That's when creating becomes joyful again, when service becomes sacred, when expression becomes natural. You build, you write, you teach, you love, not because it proves something, but because your entire being says, this is it. So if you've been wondering where your motivation went, if you've been staring at the ashes of your old drive, wondering if it's ever coming back, just know that wasn't your failure. That was the old fire burning down. So something deeper, something real, could be lit inside you. A flame that doesn't flicker when external winds blow. A light that doesn't need constant fuel. A quiet fire that burns from the center of your being. Carl Jung never said this path would be easy. He knew it would be messy, confusing, long, and deeply human, but he also knew that if you made it through, if you stayed present through the void, you'd find something stronger than identity. You'd find yourself, not the ego self, not the conditioned self, but the true self. If you're listening to this right now, you're not at the end of your awakening, you're at the beginning of your becoming. This is the part where you build not from pressure, but from alignment. Not from reaction, but from awareness. Not from fear, but from love. And yes, it takes time. Yes, you'll still feel waves, but you'll move differently now because you're no longer chasing something out there. You're moving from what's real in here. If this message spoke to you, if it helped name something you've been carrying in silence, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what this part of the journey has felt like for you. And if you want more content like this, where we explore psychology, soul, and self-awareness in a way that actually makes sense for real life, make sure to subscribe to Fractal Wisdom, because awakening, it's not the end of the story, it's where the real story begins.